Da-da-da, da-da-da-da.
Welcome to another episode of Alternative Improvised Radio, or AIR. I'm your host, Don Kleppen. Thank you again for joining us. And joining me this week is Joe Room. How's it going, buddy?
How are you, Don?
I'm excellent. Thank you for joining me again this week.
My pleasure to be here.
Also on this side, in for Pat Perez, again, who is parasailing with the Colombian cartel, is Philip Bobbitt.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Phil. I was really excited to hear that you could get the time off from Starbucks to come down and talk again.
Well, being the top employee of the branch has its benefits.
Yeah, I would imagine it does, and not just all the pumpkin spice latte you can drink.
Oh, you have no idea.
I don't, but I'd love to. We got a great show for you set up. We got some topics picked out, and we're going to get started here. You guys ready to go?
I'm very ready.
I agree with Phil. Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. That'll get you going, get your heart pumping.
I'm juiced.
Movie trailers.
Oh, yeah.
Did you guys happen to see the new Dawn of Justice Batman vs. Superman trailer?
Definitely.
I did.
That has, I know that just came out, I think, a couple days ago from now, but that really got me excited for it. I kind of remember all the controversy when Ben Affleck first got cast as Batman, and I remember everyone kind of just, after Christian Bale, it's like, okay, not exactly, it leaves kind of a bad taste in your mouth, but this trailer really, it puts a lot kind of exciting things out there, things to be excited for in the movie, I thought. Not the least of which, I was going to say, is the introduction of Wonder Woman at the very end. I thought that was a really cool addition.
I'm very excited to see her. She's a character who's kind of been left out. Most of these comics and even in the Superman movies, she hasn't been in.
Not at
all.
all.
A long time.
Yeah.
And I would agree 100% with both of you that it, after watching the trailer, and I, of course, had the initial hesitation because Ben Affleck's Daredevil left such a sour taste in my mouth, and then, of course, Christian Bale just knocked the Batman role out of the park. He was stellar as it. How do we gauge Ben Affleck having kind of this mixed bag of tricks going on? And I'm excited for what I saw. I'm definitely willing to say that I give him the benefit of doubt.
Well, I can tell you on that note that as long as he doesn't growl as Batman, he's on a slightly better kick than Christian Bale did as Batman. Bruce Wayne, however, he's probably going to have his own interesting take. What I was going to say is it's really cool to see Wonder Woman, especially because the superhero movies, superhero genre is a very male-dominated genre. You've got Scarlett Johansson, but she's not, as far as superpowers, she doesn't really have that many powers. She's more like a clever spy. Since Elektra, was that the last one? Or Catwoman, I guess, was the last female, strong female. But Catwoman in the Batman movies, but she's a thief. She's not really. It's nice to see like a superwoman.
Yeah, right. An actual lead female superhero character.
And I will say on that note, I haven't personally watched it, but I've heard really good things. There's the Supergirl show that's been out this season.
On CBS.
I've heard a lot of good things. It's definitely kind of a multi-demographic. Both the more of our generation can enjoy it because, it's a fresh take on the Superman motif.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, here's a positive, strong female role model that really has been conspicuously absent in the last 30 or so big productions like this.
I think there's definitely a sort of swell in sort of like the feminist movement in terms of, I think, the characters that are now being presented for as leads. Before it was always like you might have a good female character in a support role for sure, but now you see with Supergirl on CBS, Jessica Jones on Marvel, which, really, I watched a couple episodes of it, and it's not really my cup of tea. Didn't turn out that great in my opinion. But the whole show is its strong female characters. They are the center of the show. It's not just her as the hero, but it's like Trinity from The Matrix is playing this high-powered attorney who's her pseudo boss, and she's like divorcing her like doctor lesbian life partner, and it's like there's just a lot of there are just many strong female characters, and it's like a very modern progressive like show. And thinking of Mad Max with Charlize Theron is who sort of stole the show in that one, and it just, I think that there are many more, and Wonder Woman here now. I mean, at the end of that trailer too, it was like she sort of was taking the lead in that fight, at least in the shot that we were looking at. The villain kind of comes up, and Batman and Superman had been fighting, it seems like, and then Wonder Woman comes in and saves them for the moment, and then all of a sudden she's sort of like at the head of the pack. So like it just gave you the impression that she comes out of nowhere and she definitely like takes control, and it just made me think of all those other examples of a female character being really strong and kind of coming in and being a lead, being in control.
Well, it's interesting too because it's hard as a superhero for a female to be both sexy and badass.
Speaking of kicking ass, I just had this thought. I'm curious because in the end of the trailer we see Wonder Woman with a sword and shield.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what kind of powers they're going to give her. Are we going to see the lasso of truth? Is she going to have flight? Is she going to have like the
she had
magic
kind of
deflecting?
A shield.
Well, in like the cartoon, she has the bracers that are like the crazy deflecting bracers.
Yep.
But so I'm really curious to see where they go with the Wonder Woman character.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting too, and. Another superhero movie that I had seen a trailer for recently, Civil War, the Captain America Civil War movie, which good. Oh man, I mean it's really cool because obviously it's Captain America, Marvel, all that good stuff. But what I think is so interesting about the Civil War storyline is that it actually pits Captain America against Iron Man, and there are various heroes fall in under those two, and it's like two factions against each other. But for the first time, it's not like Avengers versus villains, and aliens or whatever. It's kind of Avengers against each other because they fall on two sides of this divisive issue.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say, they also reverse the roles of their characters. Yeah, you were going to probably say
absolutely.
Right in sync. Because, Captain's usually the one following the rules,
yep.
and Tony's usually the one who's breaking the rules.
Right.
They switch roles.
Yeah, the trailer definitely alluded to that, where you find Captain on the opposite side now. All of a sudden, who's normally the poster child for rule-abiding and kind of like, going with what the man says. He's the one who's against this superhero registry ruling, while Iron Man, who's typically the rebel, the guy who can't be controlled and the wild card, he's the one who's on the other side saying that no, if we can't, I think a line of the trailer is, if we can't accept limits, then we're no better than the bad guys. So he's kind of taking this weird authoritarian view, which is the opposite of how he normally goes.
I think it's also interesting to see how they've really done the flip-flop, not only of the whole twist like we're talking about, but then you also have this wonderful but so emotionally twisted. One part in the trailer that stood out in my mind is when it looks like Rhodey's on the ground and he's hurt, and Captain apologizes to him and he says, "Sorry, but Bucky's my friend." And then Tony says to the Captain, he's like, "I thought I was too."
So yeah,
that is so potent. And then the visual they show us following that is haunting.
It's great. Yeah, you got the last shot of the trailer is this brief scene where you got Iron Man like on one knee, sort of on the ground, being beaten down by Captain and Winter Soldier Bucky. I can't remember his last, Bucky Buchanan or
Bucky
something
Barnes.
Like that. Oh yeah, there you go. So him and Captain are just sort of tossing the Captain's shield between each other and using it to like beat down Tony Stark in his Iron Man suit, and it just sort of really it sort of epitomizes that movie. Again, it's just the image of Captain America beating down Iron Man is like, it just goes against what you've seen so far and the instinct of all that, and it's just kind of crazy.
It says a lot towards their childhood friendship. In a way, how that's more powerful than even, because Tony and Captain, they're more of a business partnership.
Right.
I would call that an alliance.
They were an alliance. They're actually adversarial because of the exact opposite position they are in the Civil War.
Exactly.
Tony was more the rogue. Captain was more follow the rules. That put them against each other, and they had a lot of arguments. But then they became friends. I thought I was your friend, and so no. True friendship, stems from the roots.
These superhero movies, these are, they portray violence. A lot of these games that are coming out now, GTA, Fallout, I mean, there is violence in those games. Do you guys think that has any effect on the people playing the games, watching the movies? Do you think it's contributing to sort of real-world violence?
I would argue no for quite a few reasons. I suppose you could make arguments for either side, but as somebody who has grown up being fully immersed in this video game and pop culture evolution of violence, shall we call it, and specifically let's go even further and call it guns, because that's really the meat and the potatoes what we're talking about here when we talk about society being violent and the effect that these games have. I would argue no.
I got you, and that is the meat of what we're talking about. Guns. That was kind of why I was bringing up the topic, is because the next thing I know we all want to talk about is gun control, and that being on our minds. Speaking of superhero movies, speaking about portrayal of violence, and really just kind of keeping guns on the mind. Obviously, we're just a few days removed from the recent attack in San Bernardino, where I think it was 16 people were shot down.
14 killed, 17 injured. It was the worst mass shooting in the United States since Sandy Hook.
Right, in 2012, exactly. And so just, obviously when something like that happens, and it is by no means the first mass shooting of this year, it just kind of makes you think about gun control in the U.S., the amount of guns that we have here, the laws, and how we compare with other countries that don't have anywhere near the amount of gun deaths that we have. And you just kind of, I think as citizens who are sick of hearing the news stories about people dying for whatever reason, it just makes you think about the issue of gun control. I mean, America is obviously we're one of the most advanced countries in the world, heavily industrialized, and yet other countries with less population and even less, some might argue, freedoms have done a better job about keeping their guns out of the hands of criminals or people that are going to kill others than we have.
I think that's a very interesting and poignant remark you just made, because we are certainly on the forefront of so many things, but when it comes to something that has so many facets and is time and again proved to be just this raw wound that we can't ever heal from, it's interesting to note that we struggle with this when other countries that perhaps do have less opportunities and freedoms than we do here in the States don't have these issues where we have to become almost desensitized to the violence that happens around us.
Yeah, it was. I believe it may have been the governor of Colorado, I think, or I'm not sure which state, but it was someone who obviously made a remark just after one of the recent shootings. It may have been at the Planned Parenthood in Colorado, or maybe it was after the San Bernardino shootings. But it was something about, they basically called what we do after these events now, after these tragedies, these shootings. It's basically, he called it like a facade of grief, or a facade of consoling. And it's like, it is now. We've become so desensitized to it. Mass shootings are so in the news so regularly in America that it seems like it's an act of when people are grieving or consoling others than an actual emotional response to the event.
It's testing our resolve to homicide in general. It's a moral. Down at the root of that problem is the question of what value is homicide to our society. Because if you think about it, the majority of deaths from guns are both violent killings on the streets, but also suicide. A lot of people shoot themselves. So you can kill yourself by stabbing yourself with a kitchen knife. They're not going to ban kitchen knives. You got to cut food. You can stab people. It's just a lot more difficult. It's a lot easier to pull the trigger. Boom, done. It's just the ease of the method of committing the homicide. So, you know what? This is really testing our will to actually be desensitized to the act of murder and mass murder. That's the test of it. How do we value that, and how do we deal with it? Because it is a crisis.
Debates about guns are never exactly cool-headed. You know what I mean? I think when you bring up the topic of guns, it conjures a lot of different imagery in different people's minds, experiences. If somebody is well-versed in guns, if someone's never seen one or doesn't know one, there could be fear. But the thing that really changes people's opinions on it, the thing that affects it most, is who's holding the gun. And you really, like, when you're talking about them, you need to think about what exactly a gun is anyway. I mean, it's certainly a tool used for killing people. But more than that, it is a disruptor of the natural order. When a situation's happening that's typical, a tough guy in a bar is arguing with a not-so-tough guy in that bar. 9 times out of 10, the not-so-tough guy is going to back off because he knows if it comes to a fight, he's going to lose. If that not-so-tough guy has a gun in his pocket, all of a sudden that situation changes, the outcome changes, and there could be more violence involved, but basically the not-so-tough guy now has a better chance of winning. So that's what I mean when I say, like, a gun disrupts the natural order of things. And by the same token, a young woman walking across a college campus, if she's unarmed and gets attacked, by some kind of sexual predator or something, then, natural order, what's going to happen. But if she has a gun to protect herself, well, then that's a disruptor of the natural order, but that's a good thing, too. So you could argue that in that sense, the potential for her defending herself, even though it might be violence, is more of a good thing. And that's the reason I think that it makes people feel so many different things, is just simply imagining different scenarios of who is holding that gun. It just changes your thoughts about it completely.
I would definitely agree because, obviously, and unfortunately, this is just human nature. We stereotype, and that's absolutely 100% true. And you're going to have a very different, of a police officer that's off duty or a former, Marine having guns and gun training and using weapons is going to conjure a much different image than, if you give somebody an ISL flag and a mask, for an extreme example, or pick like Dylan Roof, kind of a estranged young boy who walks into a black church and just lights the place up because he can. I mean, it's a different kind of emotional, mental, and almost physical response, I would say.
Interesting you say who's holding the gun, which actually brings kind of the hot topic of the debate that's been since the beginning, is the interpretation of the Second Amendment.
Right.
And I'll just read through the amendment itself. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, the main question about that amendment is, are they talking about individual rights or the right of the society as a whole to bear arms? Meaning, does each person have the right to own a gun, or do we as a society have the right to protect ourselves with an army? That's the main question about the topic. That's what stirs the debate of the interpretation. They got the one side that say, no, we don't. It should not be in each person's home. It should be trained officers who protect us all. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of the coin, it's that each person, should have the right to own a weapon to protect themselves.
In light of that, and that is a great point, Phil. That's sort of the central piece of the puzzle, the Second Amendment. We have another thing that makes America different than a lot of the other countries is we have a constitution with certain rights that are protected, and guns is number 2. It's right up there at the top of the list.
Right after free speech.
Yes, and again, it is vague enough where you can make an argument supporting many different scenarios in terms of what gun regulation means in this country, but it makes me want to bring up Switzerland as an example, because in Switzerland, I thought it was interesting to read this, and I read this in the book Freakonomics, where the economist Stephen Levitt talks about Australia and gun control and how it affects violent crime. And he brings up Switzerland because Switzerland is a country that has more guns in it than almost any other industrialized country, the U.S. included.
That's correct. They have 45 guns per 100 people.
That's incredible.
Every male in Switzerland, every adult male is issued an assault rifle that they are allowed to keep in their home, and it's for militia purposes. Every single adult male in Switzerland is issued an assault rifle, and yet Switzerland is one of the safest places to live in the world. So I think that's a perfect example that guns themselves, the amount of guns in a country, do not cause violent crime. They don't cause crime at all. I think that one of the big problems of the U.S. is that the attempts to regulate illegal guns, the illegal gun market, crimes for, using guns illegally, I think at best they're feeble.
Yeah, when they ban assault rifles are responsible for 5 to 6% of the actual gun deaths.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost insignificant, the amount that regulating those specific guns doesn't really affect the whole grand scheme of things.
And it's certainly interesting to note that when you do look at the whole grand scheme of things, yes, obviously Switzerland is a good example, but they're not the United States. The United States is its own entity.
Yeah.
It's got its own thing going on, but we can certainly look at it as a good indicator of here is a country that knows how to do guns.
Right.
It's very clear if we look at statistics, we look at the knowledge that we are given. But then you translate it to here, and I kind of wanted to also comment, a lot of the guns that do have, a lot of the killings, of course, are illegal guns, but a lot of the guns that are responsible for the deaths in America, they can be 100% legal. Go to a trade show and buy it from a private seller. There's no need to go through the regulatory processes when it's just buyer to seller.
There are obviously loopholes, even when you do have regulations in place that are supposed to keep, the guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. But as you were just saying, there are loopholes for those. And another point that's brought up in the book Freakonomics is that regulating a market for legal guns doesn't really make a whole lot of sense economically, mainly because, yes, you're saying, okay, there's a waiting period. We're going to screen these people psychologically, really vet them thoroughly to make sure that they're not crazy or that they're not going to do anything, whatever. And that's great for legal guns and purchasing legal guns. But many of the violent crimes that happen, many of the guns that are used by criminals, people incarcerated for crimes, they're not exactly going out to buy those firearms at a local gun store. They're getting illegal guns from wherever they get them. So the regulations coming down from the feds talking about waiting periods and no assault rifles or whatever, that's not doing anything to address the ocean of illegal guns that are already in the U.S. So something that Australia did to address that was the government buyback program. And they said, obviously they didn't collect all the guns out there, but they got something like 20% of all the assault rifles, at least, that were in existence in Australia. And that's significant.
I would agree with that. I think that's another great example of a industrialized country coming together with a solution that works for them about guns. Again, though, that's Australia, and how does Australia, of course, convert over here to America, where, again, you were saying it's in Second Amendment.
And it's true, and I understand that. And also, I'll say this point, too. This is from President Obama was very candid in an interview he did with Mark Maron on the WTF podcast over the summer. They talked about gun control, and Obama very openly said he doesn't think anything's going to change in this country regarding guns until, and this is his words exactly, the NRA loses its grip on Congress. And just in no way mincing words, he said that the NRA has control of a lot of the lawmaking body of this country. And that is why we haven't seen a sweeping reform like happened in Australia or anywhere else. It's not exactly that there's like a lack of want or that people aren't shocked by these mass shootings. I think it's the fact that once it comes down to making policies and actually bringing up a bill and making it into a law, there are people that are just bought and controlled by the NRA, and it's in their best interest to keep the gun market as unregulated as it is now.
And I would say that, of course, applies to a great deal of politics that happen here in America, is that politicians are generally bought. But it's interesting to note that even back when the NRA was, and this is, back when the NRA was founded post-Revolutionary War, with the purpose and intent to train and better teach Americans how to properly wield firearms.
Right.
There was already dissension.
Yeah,
there was already a large enough voice of dissent.
Even though America is its own country, I think that the fact that we're supposed to be a world leader on so many fronts, and in 1996, Australia had one mass shooting, and that was enough to stir the country. Political allegiances aside, everybody was able to come together and launch this sweeping reform, which is still intact to this day, 20 years later. And yet here we are, and it's 3 years later from Sandy Hook. And it was, I mean, a horrific tragedy that people still talk about, and it's horrifying. And yet, according to the BBC, we were talking about it, we've had 353 mass shootings so far this year, 62 of them at schools. And we're talking about over 12,000 people just this year in the U.S. dead from guns.
Everyone seems to be sitting back and waiting for someone else to make some kind of a change or to make some kind of adjustment, when in fact, everyone who's sitting back, we all kind of have to do it together, but no one's actually sparking the change. So we're stuck in this loop. We're stuck in this loop where these people are committing these crimes again and again, and everyone's just kind of waiting and waiting until, I mean, what is it? What are they waiting for? We gotta spark it up.
But I think what you just said speaks, it's a two-pronged thing. It speaks to not only how we as an American society have become almost desensitized, because you have to be. You can't live in a society where there are more mass shootings on record than there have been days in this year. I think it's also very poignant that you brought up Sandy Hook, because I feel like that was the crux, if you will, when the lawmakers saw the tragedy and the horrors that were the result of Sandy Hook, and for the country not to rise up as one and come up with a sweeping reform like Australia did. That's
my point,
yeah.
Really, is that it's like, I know that it's not going to be the same as it was in Australia. It's not going to be exactly like Switzerland's situation is, but I think what's disturbing is the lack of an effort to make a change, the lack of willingness from Congress to try again to submit some kind of bill to make sure that these shootings don't happen over and over again, because it's nothing has happened. It's Sandy Hook was 2012 now. I mean, this is exactly 3 years ago, and we're sitting here in the same place. I mean, at the San Bernardino, it just happened last week. And all it took and again, not to just keep harping on Australia, but for that country specifically, all it took for them was one mass shooting in the 90s, and that was enough to just galvanize them into action. And the fact that hasn't happened here, if there's any function of government in this day and age, it would be to quickly come up with something like this in order to make sure that this country is not continually subject to them. And I'm not saying there should have been a law passed by now, but I am saying that the fact that there aren't continually bills on the table, the fact that, I mean, since Sandy Hook, since the first bill or two, I haven't heard any firearm control bills even pushed, even like talked about moving through the Senate or the House. So it was just something that was on people's minds when Sandy Hook took place, and again now when they actually happen. But unfortunately, after like a month or two, it seems that people's attentions kind of wander, and then it's just not that much of an issue, and we move on. And I'm saying, I think that I expect more of elected officials knowing that more than 12,000 people in this country have died. More than 2/3 of all the deaths, all the homicides in the U.S. every year come from guns. These things I would expect them to take action to correct, because I definitely think that qualifies as a job function of theirs.
It's an interesting point that you make. I was following. I still keep up with the Daily Show now that Trevor Noah's taken over, and he did a little spiel on Barack Obama and how he, as the president of the United States, has to continually readdress these tragedies and keep coming to the podium and keep saying the same tired phrases. When is it going to be enough? What is it going to take? And I feel bad for him for two reasons. Because A, he's the leader when all of this is happening, and that's unfortunately a direct reflection on him, even though he may or may not have anything to do with it. But two, it's the credibility of Obama and also the other politicians who get together and say our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and the families. I mean, the sincerity has dropped far below a believable point at this point. I don't feel that when some paid senator or representative says, "Oh, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families tonight," you can only say that so many times. It's like the boy who cried wolf. Eventually, it's not going to mean anything to anybody, and I definitely think we have far reached that point, which is also a damn shame.
Well, that's his test. That's his test right now, is to have us not be desensitized, because, like you said, it's a defense mechanism. You can't, if you get hit enough times, eventually you develop a tolerance to it. So it's the kind of same thing with the tragedy. You develop a tolerance to all these tragedies that it looks like he doesn't care, but he's at a point now where what more does he have to do? He obviously cares, but he's even said, I saw one of his press conferences, he's like, "I'm just doing a speech. I don't know what to say anymore." He's like, "I'm done. What's it going to take for there to be some change?" He even said exactly what you said. He's like, "I don't even know if I sound sincere anymore." He's like, they're self-aware of what they're, or at least he is. I don't know about the other politicians, can't speak for them, but he seems like he's at least acknowledging that this is just, we're just going. He's like, "I'm just going through the motions now."
Right.
I read that socioeconomic status is an antidote for homicide.
No kidding. Explain.
That's basically it. The main cause, the main reason why people don't feel the urge to commit homicides, because they feel like they're accepted in society and they're at a comfortable place. It's a psychological analysis of the situation of homicide in general.
I would say that I think socioeconomic status is one of many possible indicators or predictors of potential criminal activity.
Yeah, there's no way there's a numerous amounts of factors, but
but I think
what is a factor?
I think your point though, in that if someone's leading a happy life or a satisfied life, they're much less likely to commit a homicide, to commit any kind of violent crime, because they're happy, because they're at least satisfied. It's only the people that are truly on some level deeply unhappy or disturbed that are lashing out in that regard. That is something that we can't control. That's something that no governing body would ever be able to control. I think the only thing you can do for that is try and have an open-minded and good policy on mental health and rehab and a good program to try and get people back into society or help them with their mental issues, for sure. But I think when we're talking about gun homicides in particular, the only way that a government or a governing body can do anything about that is through gun regulation. And the point you made earlier, Phil, about it being the responsibility of everyone to stand up and do something, it makes me think of, I think it's the priest in Boondock Saints who is giving his sermon, and he says, the most concerning evil is not the actions of evil men, but the indifference of good men. And what I think when we talk about gun violence and the lack of an effort to control and this sort of thing, we're talking about just that. Indifference of good people. You're allowing these mass shootings to go on unchecked. You're saying through lack of action that you're giving it sanction. You're saying that it's okay.
Now be careful, because you're traipsing a little close to the line of placing blame on the citizens that are not to blame for this.
No, don't misunderstand.
You're dancing close to it. I'm not saying you're touching it, but you're getting close to saying, because as a citizen myself, it's hard for me to see what effect I can have as a member of millions of people. It's hard for me to actually see the effect of change I can have personally. I could write a letter, but what good is one letter out of thousands of people in my district going to do?
No, I don't. I'm not saying one individual is really responsible for standing up and, changing things. What I'm saying is that it's a collective effort. It's something we all need to stand up and say that we're not okay with this happening in our society, and we need to change our elected officials to reflect those viewpoints. I'm not placing blame on citizens, but I am saying that people that stand idly by and watch as these mass shootings continue are as worthy of blame as the politicians that don't enact the bills to protect it.
People that don't do research on the policies and don't vote for the right people.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's exactly another part. Uninformed voting.
And sorry.
Or lack
No,
of voting.
please.
In the case
That
of America,
too.
lack of voting.
That too, exactly.
I think a lot of it, you're right, a lot of it does come from the apathy, I think is a good word, of the standard American citizen when it comes to letting their voice be heard. You know, we're going into 2016, guys. There's so many other things we need to be worrying about than, you know, getting lit up at a mall just because you happen to be unlucky that somebody was angry that day.
One last point that I wanted to say is that talking about it like tools, and you mentioned the privilege thing, that made me, before when I was considering gun control, I started thinking about it like cars. Driving a vehicle is a privilege that we afford to responsible 16 and older adults in this country, but it's not a privilege without responsibility. You need to maintain a valid license, which means going to the DMV every couple of years, maintaining a license, showing that you're familiar with the rules and how to drive. You need to have insurance. There are things that you need to do and be responsible in order to enjoy the privilege of owning and driving a car. And I think that owning a gun it could be viewed similarly, because, at least in terms of regulation, because I think it's something that should be viewed as a tool for a specific thing, but it's not something that we afford to people without confirming their responsibility and validity of their privilege.
There is one difference, though, between the two of them. A car has the purpose of getting you from point A to point B. A handgun has the only purpose in existence to end the life of another creature. What purpose? What useful tool purpose other than to end another life does a gun serve?
Leverage, the threat of that harm. Also, you don't have to end someone's life. You could shoot him in the kneecap, or I'm just saying it is a tool that is certainly capable of killing people. But I would argue that even owning one, that might not be your sole purpose. People own guns for years and they may never discharge them.
Okay, so then it's the purpose of having power over someone else. These shootings are creating a situation where everyone walking around is wondering, am I in the right place today? Am I in the wrong place today? Right?
Well,
that's what they're trying to. That's what they're creating.
Those people at that San Bernardino Center, they were just doing their jobs. They didn't expect
a place that
people to walk in, right.
that supports the local community with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
They're not only do they. It's not like they're working at Walmart. They're not like enslaving Walmart people. They're not like corporate Walmart, It's not like, stereotypical people that are ripping other people off. It's like people that are actually helping others.
Right.
I mean, there's literally no thought to it. It's just, is it random, or maybe there's a grudge? I don't know. Keep in mind also Prohibition, for example. From the time that they illegalized alcohol, it took them 14 years to re-legalize it, just because it took that long to draft a new amendment. 14 years to just, and that's something that everybody was on board. The same thing. Hey, we want to have a fucking drink right now, and that's like an entire unified force trying to change it. 14 years.
Speaking of Prohibition, drink of choice.
I guess I'll start it off. I don't have one, guys.
Shoot.
Yeah,
no drink at all.
Just like I said before, you could hold a gun to my head. I was ironic as that is. Tell me to make you both a Cosmopolitan and a Manhattan, and I would just tell you, blow me away. I couldn't do it.
Oh my.
That's right. You're more of a soda man.
I am a connoisseur of the carbonation. This is true.
Let me tell you this. Next time you do it, add a little whiskey. See what happens.
See, but exactly. I have, and I think that the alcohol actually ruins the soda.
I know. You said that last time, damn it. You were freaking
improving the alcohol.
You a soda savant, you little
soda
little
purist.
weirdo.
But hey, no, I got you. Hey, no alcoholic drink.
Tell me about you. Apparently are pretty versed in this. I mean, there you are looking at me in absolute shock.
When you just told me, I couldn't believe it. I was like, we're all in our mid late 20s. This is our prime drinking time, and it's just like, I personally I love a Manhattan. You know, if I go to a bar and I've never been there before and there's not one of their in-house cocktail specials that really grabs my attention, or if I'm just kind of not being pulled in one way or the other, a Manhattan is sort of my go-to because I know that it's going to taste similar from place to place.
My absolute go-to drink for liquor is Jameson whiskey, Irish whiskey. Love it. But then I follow it up with any type of gin and tonic.
Nice.
That's if I'm doing my old man bits. But otherwise, I'll just drink a beer.
There you go. I
Mix
got
and
nothing
match.
wrong with beer, but there's I can drink beer with the best of them. Obviously.
What's your beer of choice?
If I had to absolutely choose an absolute favorite, I'm a big fan of the 312. It's a classic. It's
Yeah.
got the drinkability. Like
It's a
if I'm at a bar and I really am, that'll be like you said, your Manhattan, my go-to. But I do also enjoy kind of like a more of like a citrusy beer, kind of a lighter,
Blue Moon?
not so much Blue Moon.
You ever had
almost.
Shock Top?
I
Shock
have.
Top,
I
yeah,
have.
that's a good one.
Shock Top. Also, Magic Hat does a really good.
Yeah.
Really tasty.
Yeah, and but when you say drink, I don't think beer is drinking
Yeah,
anymore. Like I'll
cocktail,
have a beer with lunch. That's not drinking.
You're right.
Like when I think drinking, I'm thinking cocktails and
Yeah,
hard liquor and on the
shots.
rocks. Exactly.
Sure.
Nothing like my ham sandwich and Blue Moon right there.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
don't get me wrong, that's delicious.
Beer and a burger.
Beer and a burger.
I mean, that is like a great dinner.
Iconic, yeah.
Yeah.
Iconic is for right.
Pizza
But
and,
it's
pizza and beer.
Pizza and
Pizza
beer.
and beer, chicken and beer.
Just about anything in beer, except if you had to do wine instead of beer. Like if you were doing Italian, you
Yeah.
wouldn't do beer with Italian.
No, yeah, you're not gonna have beer and spaghetti.
That
you know
sounds
what I mean?
awful.
It's just
That's like you might as well have macaroni and cheese and
why don't you
beer.
you pour a beer in your cereal bowl? Why don't you just eat
man.
beer and cinnamon toast crunch, you animal?
That's delicious. You should try that.
Funny story. One morning in college, I woke up and I kind of forgot what I was pouring in my cereal, and
Oh gosh.
let's just say that first bite was not too pleasant.
Oh gosh, Phil.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Bud Light do not mix very well.
Oh,
That
Bud
sounds
Light
awful.
too. That's gross.
That's
Though-
just the nasty.
Sometimes beer in the morning, like a nice breakfast beer, is excellent. Like on a Sunday after a nice long night of drinking,
Sure.
but you're not like super hungover, but you do have a little bit of a headache. If you're at like a brunch scenario,
Like a
a nice breakfast beer or have you beer mimosas? Have you guys had those?
I have had a beer
The
mimosa.
mix of a mimosa and a beer. I don't even actually want a regular mimosa anymore. I prefer a beer mimosa because it's like regular mimosas are too sweet. Beer mimosa like levels that out. There's still the champagne, there's the beer, but it kind of wades into that orange juice and it's not so sugary anymore.
And I think I could definitely get behind that because, like I said, I definitely enjoy that citrusy approach to beer. And all you're really doing is just adding juice and champagne.
Yeah, it's
What,
good.
what about a shower beer?
Shower beer is also
Shower
excellent.
beer, yeah.
It's
Amazing,
excellent.
I haven't had one of those in a long time.
Yeah.
but I definitely appreciate.
Especially like if you're about to go out for the evening, it's Saturday night, it's like 6:30, and you're going
pregame
out
in
into
the
the
shower,
city,
yeah.
and you're like, I got half an hour to get where I'm supposed to be. I want to pregame, but I also got to get ready. Shower beer is like perfection. I mean, you're being efficient. You're cleaning, you're freshening up, and you're pregaming.
And also, if you make a mess with your beer, it doesn't matter.
What happens?
Yeah,
You just
doesn't
go
matter.
right
You
down
just-
the
it's
drain.
Down the drain.
Absolutely. You could even make it part of your shower.
I mean,
Just start
you
shampooing with
just get in between your toes. That yeast is good for
it. Yeah.
something.
It's like, what is that cologne you're wearing?
Oh,
it's
that's-
Hams.
Ode Bex.
Hey, you got to absorb it any way possible.
Absolutely. My pores are just as good as my throat.
Man.
I will say on the note
Wafting.
of citrus, I have recently been drinking some Angry Orchards.
Oh, yeah? You're a cider guy?
I never was before because I'm not a big fan of the sweeter drinks. I tried a Hornsby's and that was way too sweet.
Well,
Good for the ladies, but not for Mr. Whiskey over here.
Yeah.
So then I tried Angry Orchard. It's actually right in between, not too sweet, kind of like an apple flavored beer. Pretty
That
good.
sounds nice.
like
Yeah.
an apple ale almost, except like one step above because it's still a cider.
Definitely, you'd like it. Really good.
They must,
Oh,
they must
that's
be doing
interesting.
well. I've seen a lot of ads for them very much
it's
recently.
Craft beer, it's everywhere these days. There's definitely such almost a refined palate these days for beers, and everybody has their niche. And the microbrews just only do it if you're tailgating or trying to get hammered at a party. It's just there's a time and a place, and I usually default to better tasting beer. Not only do I hate myself less later, my body hates me less later. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's a
great-
win-win.
It's a cycle of positivity.
Absolutely.
I was speaking of the Angry Orchard and microbreweries and everything. I heard about a year ago that the guy who started Goose Island actually bought a cider orchard in like Michigan and is making like a hard cider. I don't even, it may be like Angry Orchard or something now, because I heard this like a year or two ago, but he was just saying that he was really interested in hard ciders and like the interest that was starting to be generated about them, and he was like, I think this is going to be a big industry too. So he was kind of going for the like a microbrew hard cider blend sort of a thing. I thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
I would agree. I have somebody I used to know. He used to go up to, well, I still know him, but he used to go up to Wisconsin, and him and his buddy, they would go hunting and they go fishing, but also on like this plot of land that they had a cider press, and they would make their own cider. And I mean, to me, that sounds great. Like,
Yeah, it's Tom Sawyer, man.
out in the middle of nowhere, hunting, fishing. Not necessarily in that order,
Right.
but making your own cider. Making your own cider.
Cram a couple more apples in there, Jimmy. That was the cider.
I could see it. Your visuals were just as impressive as your sound effects.
Spot on. Yeah, I like to entertain myself.
Absolutely.
From time to time. Favorite sports and why? I'm going to go ahead and start it off. I love football. I love to play it. Played some over the Thanksgiving holiday with my family. Always a lot of fun. Love to watch it. Just a great, American pastime. I played everything growing up. Played soccer and baseball and basketball. I wrestling and track and volleyball, like fucking everything. But football has definitely always stood out as I'd say as the favorite.
One statistic that always intrigues me about football is the undefeated statistic. That there's only been one team in the history of professional sports that has a complete, perfect, undefeated season. The Miami Dolphins of 1972.
Is that right?
And I don't know if it's true or not, but I read that every time a team gets spoiled from their undefeated season, they've claimed that it's not true, but the remaining players of that team send a case of champagne over to the team that spoiled the defeated team. Currently, Carolina is 11-0.
Yep.
The Patriots were 10-0, and they just lost their first
To
game.
the Broncos.
To the Broncos.
So
Yep.
I wonder if I'm sure that Miami team, and I've heard no matter what, those guys party vigorously and celebrate any time that's been spoiled. And there's only been 3 other teams that have had near perfect seasons.
The Patriots in what was that 2011, I think, or 2012 when they
Well,
lost
yeah.
to the Super Bowl lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
They won 18-0.
Yep.
To get to that game.
And then they lost the only game that mattered.
Yep.
And then the other 2 teams were the 1934 and the 1942 Chicago Bears.
Is that right?
No
They had
kidding.
perfect seasons, and then they lost in the playoffs.
Wow.
Wow.
34 and 42. Very interesting.
It's amazing that football's been around that long. If you
Oh,
ask me.
yeah.
I mean, I think that because I'm not a big sports guy. Like, I know you're a big football guy, and I'm doing the fantasy football, but it doesn't rustle my jimmies. It doesn't float my boat. Whatever. But I think it's interesting, and it shows how intrinsic it has become to who we are when sports is a topic of conversation, because it's been so prevalent.
There you go.
There we go.
Prevalent.
Prevalent. It's just amazing that we can talk about, the 86 Bears and the Super Bowl shovel. Guys, that was like 40 years ago almost.
I know. Yeah, that was a fucking long time ago.
I'm like,
Hey, trust me. I'm happy to remind people how long ago that was. I'm like, stop talking about that. It's 85
I mean, and the
Bears.
guy, the bald guy from Pawn Stars is going to call in this guy to rate those rings any minute now. I'm not an expert on 86 Bears Super Bowl rings. Let me call him my guy.
That's a great impression right there. Good job. It's like I was actually watching the show.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
it's the most Pawn Stars I've ever seen. That was amazing.
Well done to me then.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me, almost more so than the actual game itself. Yeah, of course I appreciate football, and I can get behind, whoever's good and whoever is bad, and I can talk about it with the best of them, at least somewhat legitimately.
Yeah, you're kind. I mean, you're into the Patriots.
I mean,
this
I
season, right?
I can
you're
talk to
watching,
you.
Yeah.
We talk about fantasy. I can talk to you about, why I think Green Bay is in a slump. I mean, you follow them a lot more religiously than I do, but I still know enough to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely, which is fine, and I think that can be said probably of a lot of people too. Just sort of a passing knowledge, able to talk about sports, none too deeply, but at least like keep up with the most current events, or kind of just have like a sort of a roundabout way of going about that.
A working dictionary / definition of what's going on.
Anytime I'm feeling behind, I just watch SportsCenter a few days in a row. I'm pretty caught up.
You get everything.
For the,
true.
The
they
main
do those,
stories.
Those like 30-second.
yeah.
I will say, my sport's always been basketball. Of course,
nice.
big on Michael Jordan back in the day. I
There you
mean,
go.
best player of all time. It's really great to kind of come up with that kind of a team and that kind of an inspiration. That's what really got me into basketball. But I will say on the note of basketball, I don't know if you've seen the Golden State Warriors. These guys, have you heard anything about these guys?
They are undefeated in their last 26 games.
20-0.
Yeah,
they are currently 20-0.
Yeah.
Unreal.
I mean, every game they win that's gone past 16 is setting a record. Because the previous record of the longest winning streak to open a season was 16 games.
Wow.
So they've set a four-game
Precedent.
game record. And if they keep, any game they win is
It's just
breaking
setting
their
a new
own record at
That's
this point.
crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, this guy Stephen Curry, I've never seen
Unbelievable.
Stephen. You're right. I'm sorry. Sorry, Steph.
You
My bad.
should be. He's
My
listening.
Bad. No,
I'm sure he is.
Oh, please don't hate on me. I'm giving you praise right now, my good sir. Because this person,
He deserves it.
I mean, his release of the ball and the 3-point shot, unreal.
He's
Never seen it before. He's a special person.
He's a perfect example of that. Like Jordan, a guy who's not only incredibly talented but so dedicated to improving their craft, working so hard to get better at little things, that over the last 2-3 years we've just seen him get to a level that he's performing at a level right now that is just unmatched by anybody else in the league.
And he's taken a part of the game that has not really been exploited to be honed as a craft. I mean, Jordan was good at penetrating to the rim, but he's also mastered the fadeaway. So, what did Kobe? Kobe almost mimicked it exactly, mastered the fadeaway. But, the fadeaway is a jump shot, and then LeBron kind of mastered the fadeaway. He's a big guy. He gets to the rim really good. Curry, he has mastered the three. He has said, you know what, I'm going to be, the three-point shooter's always been the side guy. Well, the lead guy decided to take on the three, and he has owned the three. I mean, that quick release, he's like, I've heard announcers say, the quickest release I've ever seen of almost any shooter ever. I mean, that's absolutely
He just
insane.
needs a foot of space for just about a second.
Not even. You've seen a guy jumping right at him,
Yep.
slaps his hand, but if he can get the ball out before the guy slaps his hand, it's probably going in.
Last year's playoff series, he had a couple of those shots that were, unbelievable to watch. Just there is a guy jumping right in his face, and you think that thing's there's no way it's going to go up, but not only does he get it off, it goes in, and it's just like, how is this guy doing that?
Talk about dedication to the shot. Dedication to the release itself.
And his assists as well. He has really become a master of just setting up others, passing to others to get the score. I mean, he's a real game manager out there. And it's like he's obviously, like you said, with the three and his ball handling, he's capable of taking it himself. But last season alone, he was in the MVP discussion because of his assists. I mean, he is the exact type of guy you want leading your squad out on the court.
I got a interesting statistic for you both while
Whoa,
we're sitting here.
a stat?
Absolutely.
Let's see.
So, Stephen, sorry,
Oh,
I did it too.
God.
Stephen Curry.
What's happening?
On
Curry
behalf
has
of-
a 43% success rate from shooting from the field, which is amazing.
43%.
He can miss his next 219 three-point attempts and still have a better three-point percentage than Kobe Bryant.
Oh, my God.
However-
There's a stat for you.
However, Kobe Bryant can miss his next 219 threes and still have more championships won than Curry, LeBron, Melo, Durant, Harden, Howard
Yeah.
combined.
Yes. Yeah. Point taken. Kobe
So-
has the rings to
so-
shut anybody up.
I mean,
But
we
keep
can
in
talk
mind-
about how impressive Steph Curry is, but currently Kobe is still.
Well, as we said, a legacy comes down to championships,
This is true.
and what happens? It's the same discussion we had about Peyton Manning, and we've had it a few times, I know, but when it comes down to somebody's memory, watching a guy now, we're loving Curry,
Oh, absolutely.
but years from now, when people look back, the thing that defines a player's legacy is the championships. It always is, I think.
And that speaks to sports in general, because in sports, the ultimate goal is to win the game.
Yep.
And it's to bring your team together to win the game, and to be a leader and to bring your team together and push through to the victory says a lot about the character of the player, that he's not just focused on his own stats, but he's focusing on the team as a whole. And that's why Jordan is so potent, because he had this look in his eye like, I'm going to stomp on you. You are my enemy on the court. We are not friends. We are enemies, and I can see that. And then they get off the court, and he and Patrick Ewing were really good buddies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were really good friends. But on the court, you look at them, and they're cursing each other. They're trash talking. You know, like you ain't gonna block me and nothing.
Good point, Phil. And growing up watching Michael Jordan spoils you for pretty much most sports. You know, that's I think can be said for sure. I mean, he was just the greatest competitor of all time, and it makes me think actually about his acceptance speech for his Hall of Fame induction I think it was when he was turning 50, just a couple of years ago, something like that. But it was just interesting to see him get up there, because obviously everyone remembers him as the greatest player ever, and just is so incredible. And yet he goes up there and he's like listing off these people that slighted him years ago, and it's just as if they're still there in his head, and he's just using those people as fuel to constantly be like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's what's like driving him every day. And you kind of think it's like, if that's what's driving the greatness, then like I get it, like that's kind of cool. But like I said, it was just interesting for me to see him, like Jordan, up there, someone who you think is just like, floating on a cloud of tits like for their whole life, because he's like, he's the best.
I like that analogy.
Thanks. And but no, he's not. He's up there, and
haunted
as
by that
if
pettiness.
as if it happened yesterday,
Yeah.
as if someone just was talking shit to him the other day. And he's like, Mrs. Whatever. He's like 20 years ago. He's like, I remember. He's like, all those people said I couldn't do it. He's talking about like how he could like still go out right now on the court and just like destroy the best out there. It's just like that competition, that competitive spirit, that flame, it never goes out. Jordan will be an old man playing bridge with somebody across from him, and he will be throwing down his deck of cards and like just get up and curse and leave.
Demanding a rematch.
Shuffleboard.
I demand a rematch and your potatoes at lunch.
Exactly.
Give me your applesauce.
Bingo. And trivia. He loses. He's going to be like flinging his board up. He's just, cheater! There's a cheater over there.
So what you're trying to say is that greatness stems from psychoses.
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Phil, that is a great point. I think you do have to be a little bit psychotic to be great in this world.
I would agree.
Let's hope the three of us are just psycho enough to make something of ourselves. And that's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you very much, Joe, for coming back again.
Don, pleasure.
As always.
Always.
Philip, thanks again for stepping in for Pat.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you. Hope to see you again. Thank you all for listening very much. That's going to do it for us. As always, you can tweet us suggested topics at Alt Improv Radio. You can check out our episodes at YouTube. Just search Alt Improv Radio. That's going to do it. We'll be back again next week with more topics. I'm Don Kleppen, and thanks so much for listening. As usual, take it easy.